Today's webinar is part 3 of our Did You Know series, where we cover little known but powerful features throughout pipeline. Today's topic is all about transactions, specifically things we find people don't know or often miss related to transactions. First, we'll start with something that's actually related to pipeline in general or overall. It's not limited to transactions, but it is especially helpful and important on transactions. And that is that pipeline is a responsive site. That means the pages in pipeline are designed to dynamically adjust to the device that you're using. Essentially, whatever device you access pipeline from, pipeline knows the size of your screen and adjusts the layout accordingly to give you the best experience wherever you're viewing it and using it from. So just to show you what that looks like, you notice as I start to narrow my screen, the page is starting to sort of move around and adjust based on the window width. So if I keep going, it really changes things up, bringing my left menu links to the top of the page. This looks more like pipeline will look on your mobile device. So this works across any device that you would access pipeline from, no matter the screen that you're using. That's why there's no need to do anything special, like download an app to access pipeline from your phone or tablet. So if your agents don't already know about this, we highly recommend letting them know they can access pipeline from anywhere, since pipeline has responsive design. Agents love knowing they have the convenience of accessing their transactions and docs from wherever they might be. Speaking of convenience, did you know pipeline offers various keyboard shortcuts you can use to complete common actions using only your keyboard, and you never have to pick up your mouse? You can check out all of the available keyboard shortcuts by going to the keyboard shortcuts article on our help site. If you click help in the upper right and then get help and just start typing key, you'll notice this article here. This article explains everything you need to know about using shortcuts in pipeline. But for now, we'll look at helpful shortcuts related to adding and editing a transaction specifically. There are keyboard shortcuts to both add and edit a transaction. To add a transaction, if you're using Windows, you can press Control, Alt, and T at the same time. If you're using Mac, you can press Control, Option, and T at the same time. When you do that, the Add a Transaction option will automatically pop up for you. So just to show you what that looks like, I'm going to hold down those Control, Alt, and T, and you'll see the Add Transaction automatically open. So it's already super convenient to hit this button here from wherever you are in pipeline, but also no matter where you are in pipeline, you can press those keys to automatically open up a new transaction. Likewise, you can do the same thing when you're editing a transaction, when you're viewing a transaction and want to edit it. So if you're using Windows, the shortcut is Control-Shift-E. If you're using Mac, the shortcut is Control-Option-E. So to show you, without picking up my mouse, I can hit Control-Shift-E, and I'm taken automatically to the edit transaction page. So without picking up my mouse, I can get in here and start editing the transaction. Also, while you're doing that, while you're adding or editing a transaction, you can use your keyboard to move through the different fields on the transaction. So say I just added the MLS number and I want to move down to the status. I can hit the tab key on my keyboard to move down. If the field is a drop-down menu like this, I can use the arrow keys on my keyboard to navigate through the different selections and make my selection by pressing enter. Then I can move on to the next field by pressing tab and do the same thing. Then if I'm in a date field, I can just type the date to enter it. So let's say, and then tab to move on. So I know keyboard shortcuts can sometimes be a real drag to remember, but they're worth it to learn. Once they get etched into your memory, you can whiz through adding and editing transactions in pipeline. Now, I want to mention that these items are not listed in order of importance, but if they had been, this next one would have easily been at the top of my list, and that is the transaction history. At the help desk, at least once a day, we get questions that can easily be answered by viewing a transaction's history. Of course, we do love answering your questions, but also we love saving you time. So the next time you're not sure of something that happened on a transaction, remember the transaction history. It can help you get right to answers for many questions you may have about activity on a transaction. To view a transaction's history, click Transaction History from the left menu of any transaction. The transaction history will list every action that has taken place on that transaction since it was added. It'll include a description of each type of action, who it was updated by, and when. So you can see exactly when a particular, say, checklist was added or maybe deleted from the transaction, when a particular doc was added to the transaction, or maybe when the status was changed. Now, I'm going to jump right into the next topic here. This one is near and dear to our hearts. It wouldn't be a true Pipeline Pro webinar series if we didn't mention Control F in here somewhere. Control F is a function within your web browser that helps you find specific text or words on a page. It can be helpful throughout Pipeline, throughout the web really, and is especially helpful when you're viewing the transaction. So whenever you're in your web browser, if you hit Control F on your keyboard, Command F if you're on a Mac, it'll open this little find box here. And you can enter any word that you're looking for on the page, and it will find it for you by highlighting it. So as you can see, I've typed green here, and it's highlighted the word green at the top of the page. In the transaction history, you can use Control F to find the specific action you're looking for within the history. So say I want to find tasks that have been checked. I can type the word checked and see all the history related to checking tasks highlighted. Or if I wanted to see when a particular status was changed, I can type status and see the status activity. So using Pipeline's transaction history, along with Control F in your web browser, you have the ability to get right to details about a specific activity that took place on a transaction. The next item is a small setting on transaction checklist, but it can be powerful to your personal workflow. As you know, the order of tasks on transaction checklists is set by an admin on the checklist template. But sometimes it just makes the most sense to see tasks on the transaction in the order that they're due. Well, you can do that if you click the checklist menu here at the top of checklist and check sort by date and then done. Pipeline will automatically sort the tasks in order by their due date so that you can see them there. And when you sort tasks by due date, Pipeline will remember your preference and show tasks sorted by due date on all transactions you visit until you uncheck the option from any transaction later. So if you prioritize your tasks by the due date when you're working on the transaction, you can see them on the transaction in the order you prefer without actually affecting the order of the checklist for everyone else. If your agents don't already know about this, we highly recommend letting them know. Agents love knowing they have this control over the order that their tasks are shown. Next, let's talk about finding transactions. There are many different ways to find transactions you're looking for in Pipeline. In the last webinar, we talked about using the search active transactions area on the home page and using Power Search to search by agent to find a specific agent's transactions. But today we'll look at two other ways to find transactions related to certain agents. First, did you know you can also find an agent's transactions based on their side in the transaction? You can use Power Search to search by listing agent or buying agent to find transactions where that agent is listed on that particular side. So for example, if I click the listing agent search operator here in Power Search and then type the name Otis for my agent Otis's transactions, when I search, I'll get a full list of transactions only where Otis is a listing agent. So this would not include any transactions where Otis is on the buying side, unless of course he represents both sides. I can use the same search for buying. I know Otis isn't one of my buying agents, so I'm going to search by Mark. And you can see here's a full list of transactions where Mark is the buying agent. So this gives you the ability to find transactions for an agent only when they represent a particular side of the transaction. The next item is especially helpful for offices needing to keep track of transactions for new agents or agents that have recently started with your company. You can use the search options on the transactions page to search for transactions based on an agent's start date. So when you search by a date type, you'll see there's an agent start date option here. This gives you a way to keep a close eye on transactions for your agents when they're newer to your office. For example, some offices are required to perform a special review of all transactions for agents that have been with the company less than 2 years. And some offices just prefer to keep a close watch on their newest agents. So to search by the agent start date, choose a date type at the top of the search area, select agent start date, and then you can either choose a custom range to search by a specific date or choose one of these pre-selected ranges. I'm going to choose last year here to see any transactions for agents that started last year. So this gives you that ability to keep track of transactions based on the agent's start date. Next, let's move on to a few company-wide settings that are related to transactions. So I'm going to go over to the company settings area. If you click your name in the upper right and then admin settings here, you'll see the company settings page. If you don't see this, that just means you're not a master admin on the account. So any of these settings, you'll want to ask your master admin to take a look at for you. The first setting. Did you know there's a company-wide setting that allows you to add more transaction dates? So when you add more transaction dates, whenever you're adding or editing a transaction, you'll see those transaction dates just below your regular transaction dates, like listing date, acceptance date. As you can see here, I have earnest money due date on, earnest money deposit. These are additional transaction dates that I've turned on. Once those are turned on, you'll also have the option to set relative due dates for your tasks based on those dates. So they will appear as date fields on the transaction as well as relative due dates for your tasks. If you want to turn on any additional dates, just check the box next to those dates from your company settings area and then click Save Settings. When you do that, not only do you gain that additional transaction date field, but you'll also have the ability to base your relative due dates for tasks on them. Next, automatic expiration. By default, in your account, Pipeline's automatic expiration feature is turned on. That means Pipeline will automatically change transactions to an expired withdrawn status if they're still in a listed status when the expiration date hits. If you have that setting turned on, that also means the expiration date is cleared from the transaction when it moves out of a listed status and is no longer editable. Just to show you what that looks like, as you can see, I have automatic expiration date turned on in my account. And when I change the status of this transaction to pending, the automatic expiration date is grayed out. If I were to save the transaction, then I lose that expiration date. So some offices prefer to manage expiration dates manually so that Pipeline treats the expiration dates like any other date field and won't automatically expire your transactions. If you want to turn off automatic expiration of transactions, in the transaction settings area of company settings, just uncheck the option to enable auto expiration of transactions in listed status, and then go down and save your settings. When you do that, you'll see you now have the ability to change your expiration date even when the transaction is beyond a listing status. So if you want to turn that setting on, that is there in the transaction settings area. Next, I know you're probably all already well aware of these three well-used fields on transactions: more info, admin info, and commission summary. But did you know you can set up custom placeholder text to be automatically inserted into those fields on all new transactions? For example, as you can see here in my company settings, I already have some pre-filled values for more info, admin info, and commission summary. So when I go to add a new transaction, those values will be automatically entered on the transaction for me. This allows you to track custom information not covered by other transaction fields, and also helps encourage everyone, agents and admins, to enter the specific information you're needing into those fields. Again, if you want to add the default value, and we highly recommend it, it's super helpful. Go to company settings and enter those values in the more info, admin info, and commission summary fields. Now, while we're chatting about transaction fields, a quick sneak peek, I'm delighted to share that in a future pipeline release, we're planning to add the ability to both create a certain number of new custom fields, as well as the ability to rename a few of the existing fields. So that will give you even more control over the custom information you collect for transactions. Stay tuned for that. Exciting. And this one is last on our list today, but it's certainly not least. If these were ordered by favorites, this one would have easily been towards the top of my list. Did you know you can keep track of HR-related files in Pipeline? Many offices are already using Pipeline to keep track of their HR-related files like hire dates, contract files, and license expiration dates for agents and for admins. So this is an example of an HR file in my account here. As you can see, the name of the agent is listed as the transaction name. This is agent's Otis's transaction. I have some important dates that I'm tracking for my agents over here in the checklist. Some additional information I'm tracking on the transaction, even a quick link to see Otis's transactions if I want to. Also, I'm storing some docs here, including the Otis's license number, tax records, and some forms. So already, like I said, many offices are using transactions in Pipeline as a way to track their HR files, and we hear lots of feedback that they love it. So if you decide to set up HR files for your agents, you can check out our help article. It'll walk you through each step for setting this up. If you click help in the upper right and then get help, and then just type HR here, you'll see the Paperless Pipeline, using Paperless Pipeline for storing HR files article. And that'll walk you through each step of making this work for your office. And that is it today for transactions.